Good morning. Just a quick one for you today. I thought I'd let you see and explain my Fairbot layout and why I use it and lay it out the way I do. By default, I have it set up like this with a big gap down here. That will become apparent in a moment. First of all, I just need to log in. Okay, the first thing I do is click on the select market button, which brings up the market selector, which is already pre-configured to show today's horse racing win markets for Ireland and the UK. So it's simply a matter of clicking on the select all button, add to market watch list button, and then market watch list, and then you'll see the market watch list appears in that gap that I flagged up earlier. I'm finished with the market selector now, so I don't need that anymore, so I'll just shut that window down. And this is my general layout. Now the thing to note, however, is with the market watch list, this is listing all the markets I am likely to get involved in today. And because I can access those markets by double clicking on them within the market watch list, I don't need this menu system here. So I collapse the menu to give me a little bit more room for the market on the screen. The next thing I'll do is potentially, since the vast majority of trading I do is via automation, obviously I can go into each individual market and assign automation via here. Alternatively, I may select whatever markets I want, or if they're going to apply to all, select all. And then I can assign the automation routine that I want from this drop down list here. And that's useful for me because most of my horse racing automation routines also have audio alerts on them. So it flags up to me when they're going down, when they're at the post, when they're loading and all that sort of stuff. So I've got an audio message. If I'm busy in one market, I'll get a message regarding another market that may or may not need attention. So the market watch list will carry on just monitoring these markets as and when they come along. Some other things about the layout. This panel here that displays the My Bets and the automation tab and so on, that's configured to be the same width as the market watch list. And the reason for that is if I maximise the Fairbot window, you will see that the market is then displayed right across to the market watch list. And if I just pull the market watch list down a little bit, you'll see it's the same width as that panel. And that's useful because on the rare occasions that I actually go into the ladder, that lets me see 3 runners within the ladder. Now similarly, in the way that I collapsed the menu here to give me more room horizontally, I also, particularly on my laptop, I collapse this panel here, and that will give me more room for the ladder. But first of all, I make sure that I check that everything, all these settings here are as I want them to be, because even though I collapse that panel, those settings still apply. So I just make sure that my staking's fine and the refresh time is fine, and I've got the swap option on. And to collapse that, I just need to click on this button here, and you'll see that it gives me a few more rows within the ladder. Not that I use the ladder very often. Generally speaking, I'm working in grid mode. As I say, and as you're aware, most of my trading involves some level of automation, even if that's just a simple green up process. So I tend not to use the ladder, but I might switch to the ladder occasionally just to see what the market is doing a few ticks away from the front of the market. Now within the grid, there's some things that I have switched on. You can see I've only got 2 columns on the lay side, 2 columns on the back side. I am in swap mode, however, which means that I'm laying on the left hand side but I'm asking for a lay price, and similarly backing on the right hand side but I'm asking for a back price, as opposed to the default where I'd be automatically taking a back price on the left hand side and taking a lay price on the right hand side. So I'm always in swap mode. Very rarely am I in normal mode. The only time I might go into normal mode is if I'm deliberately backing in running and I want to make sure that my bet is taken quickly. So I may go to normal mode and ask for a lower back price, i.e. a price below where the market currently is, to ensure that that back bet is taken. But that's a relatively rare thing for me to do. So generally speaking, the Betfair starting price is switched off as well. I don't need to know that, but if I do, it's just a simple case of switching that on, seeing what the figures are and switching it back off again. But generally speaking, it's not an issue for me. And the reason for only using two columns is to make sure that I've got a reasonable amount of clear space between the name and this column here, because that's where the live graphs go. I quite often refer to those when making my selections. So that's the general layout of Fairbot, especially when I'm working on my laptop, as I am whilst recording this video. On my other computer, it's attached to two 23-inch monitors, and so to collapse those two panels, the one at the left hand side and the one at the top, isn't so much of an issue, although I do tend to do it anyway. In addition to that, of course, there's various graphing that you can use. There's this graph here which graphs every single runner, which can be useful. I tend not to use that very often, certainly on my laptop, simply because it takes up so much room. If I'm using it on my other machine, it will be sitting on a separate monitor. Similarly with the individual graphs that you can access by clicking on the horse's name on the grid. So whether you're looking at the Betfair chart or the Fairbot chart, we can see that I can choose whatever runner I'm interested in simply by selecting it from the list. Now on my laptop, I'll just be having a quick look at this graph and then I'll close it down, whereas on my other machine I might leave this window open on a separate menu so I can pull it up fairly quickly. Something else that you might be interested in, the settings for the grid and the ladder are via this dialog box here. So generally I'm showing my net profit after 2% commission. In here you can customize all the various colors that we have and show the various settings for tennis and football and the like. Grid specific ones, this is where I specify the number of columns I've got. I'm not interested in WOM, weight of money, that stands for. Show the grid charts will show these charts down here. Show grid stake buttons, it shows those staking buttons there. Again, I don't tend to use those. Much of my staking is either done manually or it's handled by some automated procedure. So generally speaking, I don't use the stake buttons at all. So those settings allow you to configure the grid. There's also settings that you can specify on the ladder. Let me just cancel that and switch to the ladder and pull that back up again. So this allows me to specify the number of ladders that are visible in any one time. Specify the width of the chart and so on and so forth. So this just effectively allows you to configure the layout of the ladder interface. And that's it. That's my layout. I use that layout on my laptop. I use that layout on my other main machine, although perhaps not quite restricted. If I'm doing any manual trading, I tend to trade on my other machine where it's got multiple monitors, because I can open the thing up a lot more screen real estate, more information from the market and so on and so forth. Whereas if I'm trading on my laptop, and the vast majority of trading I do is using automation, I don't feel the need for that because a lot of the stuff's handled by the automation anyway, so it doesn't matter quite so much. I do, however, often have, or always have, my web browser open, and it will be open at Timeform, it will be open on Naps Checker, it will be open on the Draw Bias, although that's not an issue for jumps racing, of course. And I've also, of course, got quick access to the Betfair Exchange and so on and so forth. And if I'm not doing any recording, I'll probably have William Hill Radio open as well and listening to that. But again, on my other machine with the two monitors, this would be open on a separate monitor all the time rather than me having to switch back and forth. Indeed, I would separate the Timeform and the Naps Checker into two separate windows and tile them together, so I've got access to all the information I need at a quick glance on a separate monitor. And that, folks, is essentially it. That layout suits the way I trade. You can obviously do and change things around yourself. For example, one of the things that you might want to look at is using this button here, which pulls the market out into a separate window, which then allows you to open up a completely separate market. So that, in this case, is a completely different event, a different race at a different venue, but it could be a related thing. So for example, if you're trading football, you might have multiple windows open showing the correct score market, the over-unders market, the match odds market. Or going back to racing, you might be looking at the place market and the win market. Again, this is something I don't generally do when I'm trading on my laptop. I tend to be concentrating on the one market, handled by a lot of automation. But if I was doing it on my other machine and I'm looking at some mechanism between multiple markets, place market and the win market, for example, having multiple monitors allows you to open up those windows in separate locations and make it easy to glance between the two. It's a bit more awkward on a laptop with the limited screen size. Having said that, that's not the type of thing I do. It doesn't fit in with the way I trade, generally speaking. But it's certainly something that you could look at. Anyway, that sort of layout suits the way I do things. No doubt you can play around with the layout yourself and make it fit with your own way of doing things. Okay guys, speak to you later. Cheers.